Hi there, my name is Katrina, and I'm so excited to be taking you on a virtual tour through Stonehammer UNESCO Global Geopark. Along the way, I'll be answering some important questions about what Stonehammer is and why it's important. So the first thing I'd like to explain to you is where Stonehammer is. So Stonehammer is located on the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik, Passamaquoddy, and Mi'kmaq First Nations peoples. They have lived here since the beginning and continue to live here, sharing with us the lands and waters of what we now call New Brunswick. So Stonehammer UNESCO Global Geopark is located in the southern part of New Brunswick. Here you can see a map of Stonehammer. It's a huge 2,500 square kilometer area that includes everything from Lepreau Falls to Grand Bay Westfield and the Kingston Peninsula, to St. John, and these are the reversing falls, over to Hampton and Norton, and then back down to St. Martin's and the Fundy Trail. So Stonehammer includes all of these places and everything in between. Another important feature to note is the river. So the St. John River runs right through the middle of the geopark. This river is very important to the Wolastoqiyik. Their name for the river is the Wolastoq, which means beautiful river. And their name for themselves, Wolastoqiyik, means people of the beautiful river. So I'll have more to say about the Wolastoq in just a minute. All right, so I think we've got a pretty clear picture of where Stonehammer is now. Let's look at what Stonehammer is. So Stonehammer is a UNESCO Global Geopark. This is a really significant international designation. There are 161 UNESCO Global Geoparks around the world, but only 5 in North America. And Stonehammer was the very first, receiving its designation in 2010. We're also one of only 2 UNESCO designated sites in New Brunswick, along with the Fundy Biosphere Reserve. So UNESCO designation is extremely important and difficult to earn and hold. So having a geopark here that people from all around the world recognize and appreciate is something to be extremely proud of. A geopark is an area that holds all kinds of stories about our past, present, and future. To become a geopark, you have to have interesting geology in your region, but you also have to be able to explore what it means to live there. Our entire lives are shaped by where we live, and where we live is quite literally shaped by its geology. So let's take a look at some of that geology, starting with the rocks. So we have some pretty incredible rocks here. There aren't many places on Earth that you can see so many different kinds of rocks formed at so many different times in Earth's history in such a small area. Here are just a few of the different rock types that we have exposed here in Stonehammer. So first, we have basalts that were formed by ancient volcanoes. And we also have these beautiful red conglomerates that provide evidence of massive ancient rivers that used to run through this area. And we have glacial tills. They're highly compressed muds. They haven't quite turned to rock yet because they were deposited here not too long ago by glaciers. So these are just a few examples of the many different rock types that we have in Stonehammer, which provide evidence of awesome ancient environments that existed here. So another really cool piece of the geology that we have here are the fossils. So some of the fossils exposed here are truly incredible. We have fossils representing an almost continuous history of life and evolution, dating back 1 billion years. So this is one of the oldest and most complete fossil histories in all of Canada. I've got a couple neat ones to show you here, along with some beautiful artistic renderings by Jessica Doyle. So first we have a fairly modern fossil. It's a brittle star, a close relative of modern starfish. You can find these at the Irving Nature Park. Here we have the root structure from an ancient tree. There's actually an entire forest of about 700 of these trees that was discovered near Norton. Here you can see some amazing tetrapod trackways from LaPro Falls. The line down the middle is actually from the tail dragging. So again, these are just a few of the many incredible fossils that have been found in Stonehammer. But we wouldn't know any of this if it weren't for the people who have and still do work and live here. So let's talk about the people. Some of the famous geologists who have worked here in the past are Abraham Gesner. He was our first provincial geologist, the first one in all of Canada, and he began his geologic survey in New Brunswick in 1834. He discovered so many amazing things and inspired many others to explore the incredible rocks and fossils found here. George Matthew was one of those individuals inspired by Gesner. He actually founded the Stonehammer Club, a group of men who studied the geology in this area and who Stonehammer was named for. The Stonehammer Club made some extraordinary discoveries here that made news around the world. Mary Stopes was a British paleobotanist who became one of the first women to study the fossils here. She was able to provide some interpretations on the age of plant fossils that are still considered accurate today. This was back in the 1900s. So these are just a couple of the individuals who've worked here in the past, but we can't forget the people who still work here today. So a couple of my very good friends, Matt Stimpson and Olivia King, are paleontologists who do a lot of field work and research within Stonehammer. They're making incredible discoveries all the time, sometimes with help from people just like you. So last summer, a family from Sussex found these incredible footprints while searching the beach for sea glass. So this is near St. Martin's, and if they hadn't found it when they did, it could have been destroyed by an incoming hurricane. And we never would have known that these animals, even older than dinosaurs, were once walking around here. Something that's really important to mention too is that fossils are actually protected by law in New Brunswick. So if you find a fossil, leave it in place. As long as it isn't in any imminent danger, take a picture of it and contact the New Brunswick Museum. Every fossil is part of this geologic puzzle that we're trying to piece together, and missing even one piece could change our entire geologic interpretation of a region. So, some very important and special people working in Stonehammer. But Stonehammer is also about the places that you can visit to learn more about the rocks, the fossils, and the people. So the places in Stonehammer we actually call geosites. So Stonehammer is made up of 60 different geosites, 12 of which are easily accessible to the public. So these are places where you could engage with these significant rock, fossil, and human stories in all kinds of different ways. But Stonehammer isn't just about these individual sites. Stonehammer is what ties them and everything in between them together, connecting communities across the region with our shared histories. So when you're navigating through the geopark, keep your eyes peeled for this symbol. This is Stonehammer's logo. You'll see it on highway signs all throughout the region. These signs point you to different geosites. The main part of the symbol represents a fossil called a trilobite. If you look closely, you may also notice a person kind of gesturing at the center, representing the human element of our geopark, as well as a rock hammer to represent the history of geologic exploration here. And the lines on either side represent our amazing and complex geology. All right, so next up, why is Stonehammer important? So I hope I've touched on this a little bit already, but a UNESCO Global Geopark is an immensely important designation that celebrates how geology acts as the foundation to our entire experience as humans. Without the earth beneath us, nothing in our lives would be the same. Stonehammer ties together subjects like science, art, history, culture, in order to teach us about different communities and their heritage, the environment and climate change, and all of the ways that we can learn from the past in order to preserve the things that we love for the future. So one of my favorite stories in the Geopark that I kind of think ties all of what makes Stonehammer important together is that of the Reversing Falls. So if you haven't visited the Reversing Falls before, you may be expecting to find a waterfall flowing backwards. I was honestly a little disappointed the first time I visited, but what's happening there is so cool. I got over it pretty quick. So this is where the Bay of Fundy, with the highest tides in the world, and the St. John River, or the Woolastook, meet. So what's really cool is that when the tides go up and down in the ocean, the direction of the flow in the river changes. So at low tide, the river flows into the bay, and at high tide, the bay flows into the river, hence reversing. So it's pretty spectacular to watch, because as the flow of the river is changing, creates these absolutely wild rapids and whirlpools. The reason for these is that beneath the surface, there's a 40-foot plunge pool from a flooded underwater waterfall, hence falls. So that's where the name comes from. But how did this waterfall end up underwater here? Well, thousands of years ago, this underwater waterfall wasn't underwater at all. Try saying that 5 times fast. So, it wasn't underwater, it was at the surface, and there were people here to see it and witness this incredible change. The Woolastoquaic story of giant beaver, passed down from generation to generation through oral tradition, explains how this change happened. So this is a version of the story from Doreen Solace. In times long ago, beavers were huge animals. One beaver lived in a great lodge on an island in a smaller river joining the mighty Woolastook. Where the mouth of the Woolastook foamed into rapids, the beaver decided to build a dam. The people of the Woolastook watched angrily as their beautiful camping grounds farther up the river valley were gradually flooded. Soon the grounds would disappear under the water. They took their fears to the powerful Glooscap, who listened to their pleas. Glooscap saw the damage Beaver's dam was already causing. He called upon Beaver to take down his dam, but Beaver refused. So with one blow of his mighty club, Glooscap smashed the dam, and the river rushed out once again to the bay. Glooscap was determined that beavers should never again have the power to endanger his people's lives, and made the beavers forever after animals of small size. So that's why the river looks the way it does today. I absolutely love this story, and you may be surprised to learn that giant beavers actually used to exist. So here we have a modern beaver tooth on the top compared to a giant beaver tooth beneath. That tooth is about the size of a banana, and so these beaver teeth are in the collection at the New Brunswick Museum. So it's kind of awesome to think that beavers actually used to be the size of black bears. But they're extinct now, just like in the story. They lived in New Brunswick during a period in geologic history called the Ice Age. So many animals were larger and hairier back then because it kept them warmer in the frigid climate. There were some other pretty cool things happening here during the Ice Age too. One of the big ones was glaciers. So during the Ice Age, New Brunswick was completely covered in glaciers. Something you may not know about glaciers is that a lot like water, they actually flow, just very, very slowly. at a glacial pace, if you will. So glaciers flowed down the St. John River Valley, picking up all kinds of rocks and dirt along the way. It's kind of like if you kick your boot in the mud. You get these ridges alongside your foot and at the toe. When the glaciers began to melt or retreat, this muddy evidence, these ridges called moraines, are what gets left behind. So the ice is melting, water levels are rising, and the moraine at the mouth of the St. John River is blocking the flow of water out to the bay, almost like a dam. Eventually, the waters were able to break free by flooding the waterfall at what is now the Reversing Falls, creating the landscape that we know today. So, I absolutely love the parallels between these two stories. The indigenous story of giant beaver lines up almost perfectly with this geological ice age interpretation. We have archaeologic evidence of indigenous communities in this region dating back 13,000 years, and the last ice age only ended 10,000 years ago. So indigenous people were here during this time, observing the changes to the environment and to the animals, telling stories about it to their children, who told stories about it to their children. Some details may have changed over time, but there is absolutely truth to this story. So, something else that's really important to note in these stories is this ancient flooding event. All of this land has been underwater before. So when we think about the significant flooding that's happened in New Brunswick over the last couple years, this is especially important to understand. Learning about the past and knowing what areas are prone to this kind of flooding can help us to better prepare for future floods. And I have one last little bonus story about the Reversing Falls to tell you. It's about how the rocks here formed in the first place. So if you look closely at this picture, you can see there are two different colors of rock. There are light gray rocks on one side and dark gray ones on the other side. So these two different rock types didn't start out next to each other. They actually formed thousands of kilometers and hundreds of millions of years apart. So on one side we have the light gray rocks. They're actually a marble that formed about 1 billion years ago. They contain evidence of ancient life forms called stromatolites. These rocks actually formed in what is now South America. They were discovered here in St. John and described by George Matthew in 1871. And at that time, these fossils were the oldest evidence of life anywhere on Earth. Then on the other side, we have sandstones and shales that formed about 500 million years ago in what's now northern Africa. So these rocks contain trilobite fossils, which are my absolute favorite animal, and they might look familiar. Well, there's one behind me, but it's also Stonehammer's logo, the trilobite. So we have rocks that formed in South America 1 billion years ago, squished up against rocks that formed in northern Africa 500 million years ago, that you can visit right here in St. John. How on earth did that happen? Well, you may know that the continents are constantly shifting due to a process called plate tectonics. So the continents are continuously moving, shifting, about as fast as your fingernails grow. So about 300 million years ago, these two geologic terrains collided after the closing of an ancient ocean. So this actually brought all of the continents on Earth together, becoming the supercontinent Pangaea. So here you can see Pangaea and how everything was all squished up together. As Pangaea began to split apart, the Atlantic Ocean was born. The continents moved to their current positions, but those little pieces of Africa and South America were left behind, forming the Reversing Falls. So one side of the contact weathered away, while the other side stayed firm and hard, creating a ledge. So that's what actually created the waterfall that you've heard already over time ended up becoming flooded. So it's pretty neat to think about the foundation to that whole story are these incredible rocks that contain incredible fossils. So it really just ties it all together. I hope that you'll agree with me that these stories are something special. Stonehammer is here to help tell these stories and the many, many more amazing stories that exist in the region. So I hope that you're enjoying my presentation, getting a little taste of what makes Stonehammer so special. But there are lots of other ways that you can experience the geopark as well. So here are just a few of the others. You can visit any of the geo sites that I mentioned earlier to discover other pieces of our story. You can explore the sites on your own or participate in activities with local Stonehammer experience providers. So a great place to start your Stonehammer adventure is at the New Brunswick Museum. Unfortunately, the museum's closed at the moment, but it should be reopening in the coming months. The Stonehammer guidebook available at the NBM boutique will help you to navigate the geopark and learn more about each geo site. You can also explore the geology gallery to see all kinds of cool fossils. If you choose to explore the geopark on your own, the sky is the limit. You can drive, bike, walk, or paddle between sites. You can take a hike along the Fundy Trail or have a picnic at La Pro Falls. Admire the historic stone architecture and public art of Uptown St. John. Or examine the rocks at the Irving Nature Park. Relax on the beach at Tucker Park. Just follow the signs and make sure to check for interpretive panels along the way. If you'd like something a little more structured, you can take a tour with one of Stonehammer's amazing experience providers. There are some pretty exciting things you can do. You can kayak up to billion-year-old fossils with GoFundMe events, or navigate the treetops with Timber Top Adventures at Dominion Park. You can go rock climbing or sign up for a day camp with Inside Out Nature Center at Rockwood Park. Meander a twisting river with Zelda's River Adventures in Hampton, or explore St. Martin's by foot or by kayak with River Bay Adventures in St. Martin's. So we also offer virtual school programs, field trips, and more. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about any of our Stonehammer experiences or would like more information on Stonehammer opportunities. So that wraps up my presentation for today. I hope that you've got a bit better of an idea now of what Stonehammer is. And if not, feel free to reach out with any questions you may have. Thank you so much for joining me.